Started with some reports from the United Nations as it is set to invest a total of $106 million in the socio-economic project of Angola until the year 2021, according to the outgoing UN resident coordinator in the country, Paolo Baladelli. The organization intends to invest approximately $53 million per year. Mr. Baladelli, who is also at the end of his term of office after 9 years and 3 months ahead of the UN system in Angola, says that the country needs billions of dollars to resolve the major problems, and the World Health Organization as well will continue to support. The United Nations officials suggested to the government to create strong partnerships with the United Nations bodies and also civil society to rapidly stop the proliferation of COVID-19. Our focus on the show today, now back in Nigeria, the Customer Protection Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria has been inundated with many complaints and excessive charges from customers. Despite these complaints, the practice perceived by customers still persists. No fewer than 9 multiple charges and sundry taxes are imposed on customers as commissions on transactions. These are stamp duty, value-added tax, card maintenance fee, current account maintenance fee, annual card maintenance fee. Other charges are also the electronic transfer charges, automated telemachine charges, charge for hardware, and much more. Well, joining me now live in our Lagos studio is economist Harden Udo to discuss this and much more. Now, good to have you on the breakfast show today. In terms of regulation and the oversight function of the Central Bank of Nigeria to sanitize operation, how does this report come to you? You must have already had your own experience.
Yeah, sure.
Undoubtedly so. And this practice might also make many bank customers lose their customers' loyalty, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, true. Very true. Very true. It's sad to say, David, that for institutions that should have a fiduciary responsibility towards the client, we're seeing that that is being eroded at a time where financial inclusion is being preached about, you know. So, so many charges. Recently we hear the CBN in the zonal office saying that penalties have gone up as high as 60 billion against the banks, up from about 3.1 billion last year. When you look at charges, a lot of people are not looking at the burden to the customer. I think that's where regulators are missing it. We hear of penalties, we hear of delay in recovery, but then the opportunity cost to the client, to the customers of the bank, is not being weighed in turn. You know, penalties are being given to the banks, but the money, the discomfort, you know, as an economist, we're looking at the discomforts to the customers themselves. Say, for instance, value-added tax, stamp duties, these things are deducted from the client's accounts, yeah? Mm-hmm. Now, the alternative for those monies that are in excess, there's no succor to the client.
Okay.
You know, so... Yeah.
Let's take, for example, now the ATM charges that we also have, broadening the spectrum of financial literacy and proper communication. We've had instances whereby the charges are not properly explained, and that leaves room for speculation or misunderstanding. And to a very large extent, the banks will say, well, they have the explanations to charge XYZ amount of monies. But when there's room for communication, what should we be doing to build that in terms of financial literacy?
Yeah. I think the regulators have a lot of homework still to be done. Currently, we're running with the bank, revised bank charge policy of the CBN, validated for the 1st of January 2020. A huge percentage of the customers are still unaware of these changes, you know. So there has to be more sensitization. It should be beyond the daily newspapers. Like you see what we're doing with COVID-19, we have text messages coming to people's phones and all of those things. The level of financial literacy is quite low, and I think the banks are taking this to their own advantage, the ignorance of the people, because the people don't know. You know, look at this customer complaint department of the CBN, for instance. it said that for every infraction the bank does not record or handle on time, there's a charge or penalty of 2 million naira for each failing. Yeah? Now, if we go to the everyday brick and mortar section of the banks, you find out that there's a lot of customer complaints that are being leaked. When I say leakages, we're saying, oh, I go to a First Bank, for instance, and I'm reporting a complaint for excessive charge. Now, where the bank fails to log that onto the CBN portal, the regulators don't get to hear about that.
Okay, we'll still have a second lap of this conversation, and most likely we have to just deal with this big elephant in the room, because at the end of the day, we can't continue to have charges that are inexplicable.
Thank you, David.
Well, let's start off now with response time to complaints. Customers' complaints go beyond just the charges. Now, the need for explanations are necessary. This points to a certain level of financial literacy and fine-tuning the lines of communication.
Yeah, true. I think the CBN still has a lot of homework to get done, with the reporting of complaints particularly. 1st of January, a new banking charge guideline has been rolled out. But how many of the customers have this in their hands? Not so many. If I ask you, do you have one with you already? Okay, so the CBN needs to do more. Technology is moving faster than the regulators seem to be keeping pace of. Now, in my opinion, apart from sensitization, the usual way, newspapers and all that, I think the CBN should take a step further by building an application where you and I as everyday customers could actually just go in there, key in issues that we have with our bankers. Reason being that at present, there are a lot of customer complaints and charges that are swept under the table because of the present reporting cycle. You know, I work into probably one of the first generation or second generation banks. They are inundated with a lot of transaction complaints, chargeback complaints, and all of those things. Now, these are the people that initially debited with my account. Now I'm going back to complain to them. They tell me come back in 24 hours. 24 hours becomes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it becomes a month, you know? And so when you speak about the cycle of complaint, it's where the customers are at the mercy of the commercial banks as it stands. And I think CBN needs to be doing more. They need to be communicating the reporting lines. They need to be reporting the escalations. They need to be reporting the way people could actually come back to find redress for their problems. So that's my opinion.
And now with the COVID-19 guidelines also redefining how banking and other financial transactions are done today, what measures do you also think banks have to adopt to make transactions a little faster? You see queues at the ATM, the sit-in spaces or areas for those who want to also make deposits and also lodge complaints. It's usually quite a crowded space outside the banking hall. So at the end of the day, the guidelines are flawed.
True. Well, no one saw COVID-19 coming up. No one saw the way the dimensions of things have taken. So in all fairness to the banks, I think they're trying to provide service in the face of a lot of uncertainties. So we'll commend them for letting the systems run as they do. However, digitization has come to stay with us. They need to be running faster than they are running now. The customer complaint mechanism as it is needs to be moved or migrated online totally. You know, if you look at the CBN guidelines, it says for every customer complaint that is registered in the bank, you must come up with a registration code. And that reference code is what you are meant to hamper on until you get your complaints resolved. Now, a lot of complaints are still paper-driven. People are still going to the banks to lodge complaints the old ways. And so that's why I said the CBN needs to do more. It's still seeing itself as the banker's bank. So in one hand, they are regulating the banks as they should be doing, but the customers are suffering. And so there has to be a lot more interaction between the CBN and the customers of the banks.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
just continue to work on fine-tuning all of those details. Thank you very much for your contribution on The Breakfast Show this morning. Hardin Udo.
Thank you.
I'll